So everyone says that they want a strong mentoring culture, but few organizations actually know how to build one that lasts. Hey guys, today I'm here with Dr. Chevy Cook. He's the executive director of Military Mentors, and he spent years researching, developing, and implementing mentorship programs that actually work. In this conversation today, we're going to talk about one, the three biggest mistakes an organization makes when they're trying to build a mentoring program. Two, the must-have elements that create a great mentorship model. And then three, practical steps to get started today. So, Dr. Chevy, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Liz. Thanks for having me. Hey
All
to
right.
everybody out there in the YouTube lands.
Yes, let's do it. Okay, let's jump in. I am curious to you. You have seen a lot of mentoring programs. What is the number one reason that they just end up tanking or failing?
Number one reason is an interesting way to ask the question because there's a lot of different things that can go wrong. But in my mind, when I kind of pair the literature with my experience, what ends up occurring is people just don't understand that there is literature out there. So what ends up happening, the number one reason mentoring programs fail and then individual mentoring relationships fail as well is people just don't understand there's a structure, there's research, there's literature, there's a science behind it. Most people err on the side of the art, which is just kind of the je ne sais quoi of interacting with each other, but they don't understand there's actually some stuff out there you should read and some literature you should get into and try to implement into the relationship or the organizational level mentoring program you may have. That's how I would kind of think about that one.
So it's interesting this, we talk a lot about art and science in our
Mm-hmm.
roles and jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So really what I hear you saying is in the mentoring realm, you see people that lean too much on the art side, that it's like, I have this
Yeah.
expectation in my mind. Hey, Chevy, you're gonna be my mentor, but
Mm-hmm.
I haven't defined it. I haven't, like, there's no like framework.
No. Um, if we would think about the business realm, for example,
Hmm.
most of the listeners here might be people that work in some business or some organization. Vast majority of leaders in that space, they chase down an MBA, right? So
Yep.
they go to get an MBA from you name the school, and then oftentimes because there are more people with MBAs within their organization, right? We all kind of gravitate around these MBA or these business frameworks. So we won't necessarily have to use the language because we all understand it, but we all
Hmm.
have kind of the same background, right? We have a baseline leveling of this business degree, or maybe it's an MPA, a public administration kind of. We all have this like grounding literature that brings us to whatever that space is. Well, the mentoring name a mentoring organization. Ready, go. Right? They don't really exist unless you're in the nonprofit realm. There aren't major businesses. We can't think of a Amazon of mentoring if you really think about it. So people don't gravitate around some focused literature within that space. So since that is the case, we default to our own experiences.
Hmm.
Anecdotes are fine, but the plural of anecdote is not fact. So what I find is whether you're in an MBA or a business kind of space, or whether you're in some other organization, we end up kind of getting fractured away from what the original mentoring literature is. And maybe we lean on that MBA literature, or maybe we lean on the MPA, or maybe we lean on some other experience that we all have within that space, but we don't go through the idea or even come to the idea of, well, there might be mentoring frameworks out there or literature around mentoring that we actually need to
Hmm.
use in our organization to get the most out of the team or our individual relationships.
Okay. So if I am someone that wants to formalize mentoring, right,
Hmm.
then you're saying I need to start with literature or I need to start with a framework.
Hmm.
What would be something to avoid, right? We talked about kind of like what are those three areas to kind of not do, and then the flip side of that.
So things to avoid. We'll start there because that's the easiest one. I mean, I think I kind of already answered it a little bit where I'm like, well, just don't err on the soul side of your experience or the experience of your mentee or the experience that's just within an organization. just relying on anecdote or the art of this stuff is not good enough. The
Mm.
second thing I would say to potentially avoid is you need to be very careful about structured mentoring programs that just kind of assign folks.
Mm.
Now,
So
we can get a little bit
matching.
deeper in, yeah, matching. We can get a little bit deeper into that maybe, but just kind of looking through your roster of people and then pairing them because of, I don't know, likes or demographics or they work in the same section or those are rife with problems. And, you know, the literature would even bear out that the vast majorities of these relationships need to be kind of natural. I'm not saying you can't structure them, but just straight up pairing, like pair, you know, this person to this person, even if you put a lot of thought into it, is kind of difficult. And then the last thing I would say why things you want to avoid is are maybe the last one that you want to avoid is the idea that mentoring is something you're going to do like as a secondary thing. Like this
Mm.
is just an extra duty. This is just a nice to have. This is something that's not a primary function of our organization. More often than not, when I walk into organizations, that could be corporate, that could be military, that can be civilian, that could be nonprofit. More often than not, what I see is this mentoring thing is an extra layer. It's like a nice to have. It's a professional development opportunity, not a primary function of the workplace, which I tend
Mm.
to find is wrong. I would
Mm.
argue, and we can get into this as well, mentoring needs to be a primary function within your organization, needs to be a primary practice that you have as a leader, and not a secondary function. So those are the three things I would say to avoid. And maybe I'll pause right there before we get into some things we should do instead.
No, that's perfect. Like I started to like whenever I hear you speak, it starts to like visualize. And so I can see
Mm-hmm.
these pictures. And
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about it's a secondary thing, well,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not primary, then the moment you get busy, the moment you get overtasked, what drops? Like the
The
thing that's
secondary
not,
thing.
yeah,
Oh
the
yeah.
thing that's not important. And so I think it ties nicely into us kind of talking about like creating a model that works.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us are in these leadership roles where we're overwhelmed, like you maybe don't have all the resources. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're hearing this and they go, okay, I see mentorship's important and I want to make it a foundational, but what how do I actually do that in a way that it doesn't get kicked off to the side when I get an extra project or when my boss has a timeline.
So I would say to those people who want to mentor, who want to develop someone else, but can't really control a lot of things within their organization. Say you're not the leader of the organization, you can't stand up in front of your entire enclave and say this is the number one thing we're doing. It's mentoring, and then these other things that affect our bottom line. To that person who wants to do it but can't control things, I'm going to say what you need to do is find your calendar
Mm.
and then find the space on it to mentor. You can, more often than not, we can control various aspects of our calendar. Now, you're going to think immediately, the listener, you're going to think, well, my calendar is tied to like my work calendar and there's so many things already put on there. What are you talking about? No, I'm talking about your calendar. There's a bigger calendar here, right? You have a calendar for your life. You have a calendar for your day to day. You have a calendar for your commute. You have a calendar for your evenings. You got a calendar for your mornings. There's all kind of spaces around the edges of your calendar in your workspace that you can tweak and find space with. So that's the first thing I want to say is you need to find time. If you can find time on your actual calendar, that's even better.
Yes.
Because what you can do, especially if you're a leader, is you can signal to people within the organization the prioritization you've placed on mentoring. For
Mm.
example, if people can see your calendar and it's shared, you can
Mm.
put blocks of time on there that says mentoring this person within the organization, whatever that person may be, for that time
Mm.
block. And you can tell someone maybe who manages your calendar, or you can tell people who have right positions, right, not position, uh, access, right access to your
Yeah.
calendar. Like, don't change this block because this is very important that Liz and I sit down this Wednesday, or every other Wednesday. This is our mentoring block. So you can control that little piece of your calendar and signal to people within your organization that this is a priority. But going back to your own personal calendar, if you're not bold enough yet to do that, or don't have enough control over your work calendar, you absolutely can control your Saturdays, your Sundays, your commutes, your evenings, your mornings, your lunches, where you can still prioritize this stuff. And maybe people won't see it, but when you start sitting around and people start to ask you, well, what did you do at your weekend?
Yeah.
And you prioritize it with your mouth, right? How you use your calendar. And you say, well, yeah, Saturday, we kind of watched the ball game, but, I sat down with for an hour with Chevy. He's a guy who lives over on the East Coast. We tend to connect, and we talk about career and life, and, we have a mentoring relationship. That's how you can prioritize it for other people, even though they can't see it on your work calendar. So I would say do that.
Oh, I love it. So I'm thinking about two different things. So we've talked kind of about the person that maybe isn't in charge of a mentorship program,
Mm-hmm.
but they're going to lead themselves and they're going to go into it.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard sometimes that people say they feel like they don't know how to find a mentor, or they're disappointed that people haven't approached them.
Mm-hmm.
And curious what you've seen in the literature and kind of just an experience about that sort of friction between mentors who want to mentor, mentees who are looking for someone, and then how sometimes they just don't connect.
Aha. The age old question, do I ask somebody to be my mentor or not?
Yeah.
And if I am a mentor, how do I find mentees?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for both of those folks, what the literature will bear out, and then my own personal experience with this stuff, and being around it for a long time now, and professional practice with my nonprofit, at least 10 years, but even doing it beyond that, this is what I would tell those folks, both the mentor and the mentee. First of all, y'all need to look close,
Mm.
because what's actually occurring around you is probably mentoring in some space, but you just haven't recognized it as that. There may be a neighbor in your neighborhood. There might be somebody in your church, synagogue, or mosque. There may be somebody that's on your, you help out with youth soccer or baseball for your kids. And there's this coach that doesn't, he doesn't just interact with the kids, but he really takes kind of an approach with talking to you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are people in your cubicle next to you. There are people down the hall from you. There's a work colleague or a college colleague that y'all stay close, and you end up talking about things in a meaningful way. That's happening right next to you. You got to look close, mentor or mentee, for those folks that are either talking to you or asking you questions that are just near you. You just really never looked at that relationship as a mentoring relationship. Once you've done that kind of 5 and 25, to go back to some old military terminology. Once you've done that 5 and 25, I want you to look a little bit further. I want you to look far. So the look far is not just the opposite of the people who are within your circle. The look far is also looking for people who don't look like you. So go back to that church, synagogue, that baseball team, the bar that you go to, the team collaboration you may have around you. I want you to look at all those folks and notice how similar they are to you. And then I need you to look far enough to see a person of difference. And that difference can be across demographic kind of differences, but that difference should also be across sector, right? I'm thinking of a mentor that I have in my life who has never worn a uniform, has a lawyer-based background, and physically lives on the West Coast. I live on the East Coast, and I could go on and on and on. We're different religions, et cetera, et cetera. But looking far, so meaning looking across for differences in a way that can complement yourself and the relationship, is that farness as well. Now, of course, part of far, the easy far, is just not looking in your immediate circle. And I think when people do that, when people look far, they'll also find people who they may aspire to connect with. Now, what far is not is, I don't know, pick your celebrity online, famous person that is doing big things in the world. And I'm not saying you figure out a way to email them and say, will you please be my mentor? It's probably not going to work out. But that far could be someone you actually have a connection to, or someone that is not, inundated with notes and emails and connection requests from everybody else. And
Hmm.
that person, that far person, can just maybe be right outside your circle. Maybe they were your college professor that you had that you
Hmm.
never ever connected with again, but you had noticed there was something there, something they maybe want to contribute, and someone that you want to reach out to. And then lastly, the far also could be a stretch kind of person or arena where, maybe you do want to retire from the military or from whatever you're doing. You want to have kind of this second career. The far would be reaching into someone in that second career or that other space that you want to be a part of. That could be the far too. So for both mentor and mentee, I say worry less about the question of asking for. I'd worry more about looking close and then
Okay.
looking far. That would be my advice.
Okay, so I've got to scan both, right? Both in both areas. And then
Hmm.
in terms of those conversations, how important is specificity to the conversation? Like when I'm approaching that individual that's far, and I want to have a good conversation, what's a way that I can kind of cage it?
So, for those that haven't read a lot of Brene Brown, I'll give you probably the one thing she's most famous for. It's clarity and kindness. And she
Yeah.
specifically says, clear is kind.
Hmm.
So, when you look far or when you look close, when you're making the ask, whether that's asking for a mentor or asking for a mentee to join your life, because you can do that too,
Hmm.
just be clear, because that's the kindest way to approach it. And clear, we could get into the brass tacks of, is it a one scroll email? Is it bulletized and all of those things? But I think just simply being clear about your ask, right?
Hmm.
If your ask is, I want to be a millionaire just like you are, that is clear, but I don't know if that's what you want to ask. Maybe
Hmm.
the person, even if they're a millionaire, maybe the person has a certain aspect of their personality, a specific approach they take that you want to learn and gain knowledge from. And
Hmm.
that piece of clarity is extremely kind, but also extremely rewarding to the other person. If you're saying, I notice you are a great communicator, and I'm not really, and I
Hmm.
want to figure out a better way to be a clear and concise and powerful communicator like you are. And I would love to have a conversation around how I could get better at that. Would you entertain a Zoom call, a coffee, or whatever? And that's short of an email or a
Hmm.
LinkedIn primary message,
Yes.
or a text, maybe if you're that close, because you have that person's cell phone number, could be a very clear reason as to why you want to connect. And you
Hmm.
could do the same toward a mentee as well. If you have a potential person in your space where you want to bring them into the fold, hey, I noticed these kind of one, two, three aspects about you that are really awesome. But I
Hmm.
noticed this one thing that is kind of glaringly potentially something you're struggling with, and I think I can help you with that. And I would love to have another conversation with you about it. It's not directly saying, will you be my mentor? Or will you be my mentee for these reasons? But it's asking in a way that is curious.
Yeah.
And curiosity, a lot of times in this day and age, can be exotic and this could be some mystery there, because people, sometimes think, we tend to think very highly of ourselves and think we have it all together. That's just a kind of natural tendency. And sometimes when you're genuinely curious about a person's approach to something and genuinely curious about wanting them to learn from you or wanting them to understand that you want to learn from them, people really connect with that.
Oh, I love it. I wrote down, I've got my notes. So I've got curiosity, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, this clear as kind. Love
Yes.
that.
Very important.
Scanning, right? Looking around.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, yeah, that's really important. And then you kind of alluded to it, this kind of concept of, you never know what type of maybe it's openness, I think,
Yeah.
because we're
Yeah.
not sure how the relationship's going to go. It might be I have one conversation with this individual and it was just that's what I needed,
Yep.
and or is it going to be this ongoing relationship like the individual that's on the West Coast and you can talk through.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you captured that pretty well. I think we're done. Is it? That's it. That's all we got. No, that was good.
So if we're transitioning on like how to start, right? Like we talked about, okay, this is kind of what makes up a mentorship model. We don't have to put the formality around it and everything.
Hmm.
And let's say like, all right, dang, I've been tasked, or I just want to, right? I think mentorship's important. I've got a small section and I want to do something. I mean, where do I start, and what's the first thing I do?
So, is that in the case of trying to make it more formal in your organization, or just trying to do something for your organization in general? Help me help.
So let's say like you want to be known, your organization wants to be known for mentoring, right?
Hmm. Okay.
And I think sometimes we think a lot about someone gives us a task and they say, "Hey, just make sure mentoring is part of the organization."
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's easy and difficult to answer at the same time, because there's a set of complex factors, and there's group dynamics at play in every organization. So the way the
Mhm.
organization is structured, how you look at professional development, all these things need to be considered. But
Mhm.
I'll answer it from the easy lens or the easy perspective of just trying to give people brass tacks how you can do this.
Yeah.
So Stephen Covey,
Mhm.
7 Habits, right?
Yes.
I would say begin with the end in mind.
Mhm.
So I've done this a couple times with organizations. They jump right into mentoring and why it's important, the demographics of the people that they want to uplift or grow. They have all these kind of robust ideas around like these Saturday things and these breakfasts that we want to do, and we're going to set aside these times. We're going to bring in these guest speakers, and those are all great things to think about. But to what end?
Mm.
To what end, right? We have to start with where are we going to be at the end of all of this mentoring, the things that are going to go into the mentoring program, the things that I'm going to bring to bear within my mentoring relationships. Where do I want to be at the end of that 6 month period, that year? And then we have to walk back from there.
Mhm.
Because if you say you want to have, I don't know, clearer communication within your organization, bringing in really cool speakers that talk about like business acumen and closing the deal might not be
Yeah.
exactly what you need. While that
Mhm.
might be dynamic and fun and amazing, it might not be exactly what you need for these outcomes. Also, why you want to think about the outcomes up front
Mhm.
is because you have to have something to measure over time with, quarter to quarter, week to week, month to month, however you want to measure it. If you don't have a direct measurable at the end, you are
Mhm.
definitely not going to be able to measure along the way. And as famous people always say, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
So if you are measuring, if you have an end measurement and then you have measurements along the way where you can assess, then you can decide what you need to take out of your program,
Mhm.
cutting once, right? But you have to have those points along the way to know what's working, what isn't, what we need to keep, what we need to off ramp. So that's what I
Mhm.
would offer the listeners out there.
I love it. Right. And it is like it's almost defining what success looks like
Mm-hmm.
or what the problem you're trying to solve for.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you don't like matching.
No, I don't.
What are your thoughts on speed mentoring? Like you're trying to start and you're like, I'm gonna do a speed mentoring, thing. Or how do we feel?
I, I, I should clarify a little bit about matching. I'm not a fan of it unless it's done really well.
Hmm.
And unless again, you begin with the end in mind, you know why you want to do matching, you know the population that you have, and you're trying to get a specific end state by matching.
Hmm.
If you want to do all of that, then yes, let's match folks up.
Yeah.
It might be there could be some good ways to do that and some structure and some non-structure to let
Hmm.
some of that kind of informality and that naturalness bubble up in a relationship, especially
Hmm.
if you have things that you can measure against over time. So if you need to get out of a relationship, again, on ramp, off ramp, like I kind of just mentioned, you can do that for pairs too.
Hmm.
So I just, point of clarification for matching, but speed mentoring and that opportunity to like really connect with people really fast can work again if you have an end state for it.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, what I see is we like to do cool things or things
Mm-hmm.
that are exciting because it gives a feel. And that
Mm-hmm.
feeling is great, but feelings are also very short lived. They don't stay. And life can give us things that make us happy, sad, distracted, anxious,
Mm-hmm.
joyful. And those can come in moments, multiple moments in one day.
Mm-hmm.
So again, whatever you're doing, if it's a speed kind of matching similar to speed dating, it's got to be to some end. All right, I
Okay.
think the people who do best with speed dating, just a slight kind of get off a track on a tangent real quick. I think if people go into that with the intent of being married one day, that's
Mm-hmm.
very different than the intent of, I don't know, just having, going out with a man or some or a woman or someone else just for the sake of just having a good time and going to a movie. Your experience of the speed dating will be very different if the intent, the long term intent, beginning with the end in mind, is to get toward a marriage.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that mentoring is like a marriage, but is
Mm-hmm.
it extremely committed long term relationship and
Yeah.
a connection that needs to be beyond the movie and the dinner.
Gotta take some long walks in there as well too.
Yes.
Yeah, the awkward, silence, the
Yeah.
fights, all those
Oh
things.
yeah, all of it.
Do you have an example of like a good mentoring program that you would share and say, hey, this is, once again, it has an end state, right? And so it might not be something that I can use in my organization, but hey, here's a good case study that's like, this is what the end state was, how it works, and why it works.
Yeah, I can give you an idea without
Mhm.
disclosing the organization. One I think we as an organization worked on to help somebody. Obviously, we worked on it, so I do think it was good and it helped them. But something to consider is we were working with the organization some years ago. They wanted to start a mentoring program because they were doing exit interviews of a certain demographic within the organization,
Mhm.
and they while they were having a an extreme success bringing these people into the organization higher than normal, they were having way below average, compared to across the industry, of them exiting the organization. So they were having a big on ramp, but also a big off ramp of these folks. During those exit interviews, this particular folk within the organization said, "Well, I came from this other industry, and in that other industry, we did a lot of mentoring, and y'all just don't do that here." They heard
Mhm.
enough of that they said, "Oh, we need to start some type of mentoring program, not just assign these people mentors, but they took it the next step to say, well, we want to build a program around this." When I initially talked to them and we did those kind of initial conversations, they had that initial data, but what they didn't have was that end state. They
Mm.
thought their end state was, oh, we just want to retain these employees.
Yeah.
That was not I mean, that could be an end state, but
Yeah.
after talking with them a bunch, it was actually more about not just retention, but growing these people into the capacity to be managers and supervisors and beyond within the organization. Aha! Now we have the refined specificity, and now we know what we could build over time. So what we ended up building for them over time was they wanted a set of kind of online tools that they could use. They wanted a proprietary program that everybody could connect on a separate platform
Mhm.
to. We helped them build that. They wanted specific workbooks for their mentors and the mentees, kind of a
Mhm.
pairing of, we're going to do these things together over time. We helped them with that. And a couple other things like speaking engagements and regular kind of, not mandatory, but things that were on the calendar at a routine and regular basis so that they could kind of have those programmatics over time to, again, measure over time, and then, figure out where they needed to go from there. Um, so I think that's a good example of what right can look like.
Mhm.
And again, I illustrated a couple things I've already talked about as far
Yeah.
as thinking about what the end state was going to be and then specifically refining it, having a defined kind of problem statement up front of why do we even want to do this thing, and then having the programmatics over time so they could on ramp and off ramp things. And they
Mhm.
paid us plenty money to do it all. So that's a measure of success alone, because they thought it was worth their time. So they were going to put money toward it. Because a lot of times you have to do that. It's not just
Yeah.
about time. Sometimes you got to put your resources in some cases that can be time. And a lot of times in the corporate sector, resourcing can be funding that you got to put behind these things. You can't
Yeah.
just tell like somebody within your organization, say like, stand all this up, but do it as cheaply or as free as possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes that just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, that's that's a great point, right? We often wonder like, oh, how come that didn't work? And it's you start to reverse engineer it and go, all right, where were we on that? So I
Hmm.
definitely want to highlight for anyone that is looking at partnering with Chevy and his team, if you go to militarymentors.org, there's a place you can go. You can just fill out a questionnaire, and they have all sorts of levels, right? So you can just have a conversation with them and say, hey,
Hmm.
I maybe just am looking for a workbook. I love your workbook. It's
Hmm.
got some great information in there. And once again, when we think about how can I have a better conversation or ask better questions, sometimes when you just have that framework, you don't have to stay on it, right?
Hmm.
But it's a starting point, and it's making sure, going back to what you talked about with that MBA language, if we know what ROI means, if we know what acid test ratio is, but then we start to use this new vocabulary, we're kind of stuck. So I will have that pinned
Agreed.
in the comments.
Thank you.
Yes, and Chevy, so I'm very curious, nerding out. My last question for you is, are there any surprising research findings on like mentorship that you feel like leaders don't know or should know? And it's just how can we glean your wisdom on that?
Yeah, so I find the most interesting thing I've found over time is something that is intuitive but very counterintuitive about mentoring. And I'm gonna relate it to leadership.
Hmm.
So, this summer I will hit 22 years of service in the military. Just so
Hmm.
folks know, I also went to a military undergrad institution. So if you include that time and the prep school before it, I'm creeping up on 27 years
Woo.
of doing this thing in uniform. So I've been in and around the military, in the classroom, in combat, in
Hmm.
garrison, which is our base, CONUS base, like being at home, like just doing the day to day. I've also been in the Pentagon. I currently work there.
Yeah.
All these opinions are mine, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm Dr.
Of
Cook. I'm not Colonel Cook today, but just so I'm just kind of framing my experience of, I've taught in the classroom with cadets, and I've been out and about with special operations troops, both foreign and domestic. I've trained foreign special operations folks. With all that leadership experience behind me, I will tell you today that I believe that mentoring is more important than leadership
Mm.
because of the data. And I'm going to start from the leadership data, then come to the mentoring data, and that'll be the point to answer your question. If you look at leadership and you look at the extreme body of research around leadership,
Yeah.
you'll find all kinds of studies around what management and leadership looks like, what it looks like to get it right, how it can affect your organization, how it can impact. You can look at individual level, you can look at team level, you can look at group level. There's such an enormous body of leadership research.
Yes.
Just as much as there is that of the positive side of leadership stuff, there's just as much about like counterproductive leadership, toxic behaviors, bad bosses, mismanagement of organizations. For millennia, you can find stories and a body of literature around the negative aspects of leadership. If you don't even want to get deeply into the research, but you just want to curiously look through like New York Times bestseller list for the last couple of decades, again, you'll find tons of stuff about leadership. You'll
Yes.
find tons of stuff about bad leadership too, right? Within those, it's just kind of
Mhm.
informal. Now, to bring it to mentoring and why I think it's more important. And this is the research anecdote that I think is quite surprising. There is almost no negative outcomes associated with mentoring. I'll say that again for folks. And I will write you a check out there, YouTube land, If you find some negativity associated with mentoring, that's in a body of literature somewhere, please find me so I can write your check. I don't have a lot of money, so that might just be $5 or $6 or $7 on that check. But I will tell you this to make it serious. What you will find is the only time you see anything negative associated with mentoring is actually the lack of mentoring in a space, a lack of mentoring in the community, a lack of mentoring in the professional workspace. That's where you'll find the negativity associated with mentoring. But it's only, really, only positive outcomes. Now, there's going to be somebody out there that says like, well, you can't prove a negative, right? Or, well, it just, we haven't had enough, there's not a long enough timeline with, formal mentoring for us to actually have that kind of evidence. Au contraire, mon frere, I will tell you that professional mentoring and youth mentoring, professional mentoring alone has been around the body research since the 70s, the 1970s. So it's over 50 years worth of research. By the way, psychology is a little bit over 100 years old. So half that space has been covered by mentoring. And then when you look at youth mentoring, it even goes further back than that. And you cannot find associated negativity with the outcomes of mentoring unless there's a lack of mentoring in the space, which is why I think that mentoring can be more important than one's leadership, because this is actually, your leadership may be about right now, and it might be a little bit about your legacy. Yeah. But mentoring is actually really focused on the next generation and what the organization will look like in the future. And if you're doing what I talked about earlier, right, looking near, but also looking far, how you're touching difference is through mentoring. Sure, leadership can make differences, especially across a number of factors of difference and inclusion. But I think mentoring much more so is the way that gets done. So that's the interesting anecdote from research I would share with everybody.
Man, I gotta just drop the mic.
Yes, I think we might be done now. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we're done. I really appreciate it. Once again, if you want to reach out to Dr. Chevy Cook, I have his handles below. And thank you for your time today.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Liz. For those that really don't know me, this is an opportunity for me to fulfill my purpose. I think I'm purpose built to serve others. I do this nonprofit stuff. I do talks like this with Liz, not to boost my personal brand or anything like that. It's really for those that actually know me. Like, this isn't like a passion of mine. I think I'm purpose built to do this. So I appreciate everybody allowing me to fulfill my purpose today by clicking and listening for a little bit. And I hope to connect with you somewhere in the social media or in person.
Awesome.
Thank you.